Hello everybody and welcome back to our channel. Today's video is about an adventure that we embarked on when we realized that GW could not keep up with the demand of special and heavy weapons, and we still wanted toys to play with. I had watched 2 videos about people making silicone mold for resin, so I was pretty confident that I could make molds of bits that we already owned or would purchase, and make enough to make an army. How hard could it be? This video could have been a very boring vlog about going to the game store filled with bad dad jokes and poor knowledge of Space Marines weapons. Fortunately for you and unfortunately for me, the shelves were barren. Our local game store has tons of bit boxes. Since I'm a cheap witch, I took the hard path and decided to sift through for guys with the weapons that we were looking for. The only small problem is that I have played Space Marines twice in my life and I'm not quite sure what those weapons look like. We needed one last cannon, one combi melta, and a couple of thunder hammers. I was a woman on a mission. Please forgive the framing here, I promise I was sober, but apparently no one told the camera. After hours of playing hide and seek with tiny bits of plastic at the game store, I got back home and started playing hide and seek with little bits of plastics at home. We are never bored, even on a rainy Sunday. This part of the video is 100% a not so humble brag about all the bits that we own and that I had to dig through to find the parts that we were looking for. This is for all the GW people out there. We do have a lot of bits, just not those. And neither do you, apparently. After digging comes organizing. And after organizing, this is all the parts that we needed to make an army. Let's prepare to make the mold. Disclaimer here, it is not as easy as it seems, but it worked. I also learned a lot what not to do, so I guess this video will help you know what works and what does not work, and most importantly, what pitfalls to avoid. Please learn from my mistakes so that I did not make them for nothing. We are going to start with Legos, not the fancy Legos that are on display in your living room, the random building blocks that got punished and sent to the garage. These are just building bricks knockoff that were gathering dust. I start with building the house that you were building when you were 4, without the door. Doors do not hold resin very well. And we will stop at 2 layers, and I will explain you why in a second. After this very exceptional build, we are going to tape the inside of the mold. The goal is for the silicone to not leak, but also not stick to the mold. Both of these are critical for a successful mold. Here we use Tyvek tape because it's the cheapest of the non-stick options. When taping, I make sure that the tape only touches 2 plans and never 3. Trying to cover 3 plans with the same tape would mean taking the risk of not having a good seal. Because I trust my taping ability a lot, I also added tape on the outside to prevent a bad leak from ruining the workshop. After having finished this project fully, I can tell you that this was completely necessary, since silicone had sipped between 2 bricks, and when taking the mold apart, some of them were stuck. I used to work as an engineer in a plant where we did aluminum casting for a while. My knowledge of the casting process, the risks associated with it, and what really impacts the final result is not zero, but not perfect. I will try to not be too technical, but also not overlook problems that could impact the final result. I decided to attach the bits to a toothpick with superglue. I used sticky tack to attach the toothpick to the building brick above. None of that is very technical, and if you have any better idea, please let me know in the comment. The toothpick will be used as a sprue and a riser. These picks are more than just to hold the part in place. Where you put them on the item that you want to cast is important. Technically speaking, the sprue is a vertical portion you use to pour the resin into the mold. The risers are here to provide somewhere in your cavity for extra material to go where the bubbles will gather. If you work with a material that shrinks, the riser will also work as a little reservoir so that there is always enough material to cast what you want to cast. The key to how good the castings will be and how easy and good they will come out of the mold is how they're placed. The goal is to have half of the model above your mold line and half below. When choosing the length of your toothpick, you need to keep in mind that half-half idea that we just talked about, and also make sure that the bit does not touch the bottom of your mold. That's why we stopped at 2 layers on our little house for this project. Silicone is not free, and I'm trying to optimize the volume that I need to use with covering up the half of each bit. One thing to keep in mind as well is any loop that you have on the model. If you trap the loop in silicone, not only will it be complicated to remove the bit from the silicone, but it will also make it impossible to cast cleanly. You need to make sure that any loop is laid horizontally between the two parts of your mold. There will be mold-like cleaning, but it is better than not having a part at all. At least, that's what I did. If you have any idea on how to add a removable core at this tiny of a scale, please let me know down below. As you will see in a minute, there was a lot of mold line cleaning. So I've placed all of my bits, and now I am ready to pour the first layer of silicone. First things first, let's talk safety. As you can see here, I was not wearing any glove. What you're about to witness is yet another example of why you need to be smarter than me and wear protection. I had used the silicone before to test, but I had mixed the two parts 1:1 by volume. As I wanted to show you what type of silicone I used to make molds compatible with UV resin, I realized that the recommended ratio was 1:1 by weight. I started to pour part B, as if I were mixing them by volume and not by weight. Of course, what had to happen, happened. In a couple of seconds, we are going to see the very moment where I realized that I messed up. There it is. So for the rest of the silicone, I winged it, and I guess that close enough is good enough because it turned out pretty okay in the end. I tried to mix both parts, evening them out by going back and forth from one container to the other. Working with silicone, a good practice is to mix both parts in one container, mix, then transfer the mix into a second container. Do not scrape the side of the first container into the second one. Nor should you scrape the side of your second container when pouring into your mold. Yes, you hear me say something and do the perfect opposite. As I said, I've learned a lot during this project. As a side note, I spent way too much time trying to wash the silicone off of my hand in between the two shots. Wear gloves, people. After way too much delay due to my inability to choose the right container and wear gloves, it is now time to mix and pour. You will need to mix well, very well. After a lot of mixing, I let the silicone rest, hoping that most of the bubble would migrate to the top and pop. The problem is that silicone is very viscous and only has so much working time. After a couple of minutes where literally nothing happened, I tried to tap it on the table and it seemed to do a little bit more for the bubble popping. Now came time to pour into the mold. No lesson learned here. Just try to be precise where you pour so that you don't put it everywhere. As said before, I am going to fill in the mold just enough so that half of the bit is covered by silicone and the top half is not. Here, as you can see, the loops that we were talking about earlier, where we laid them horizontally so that half of the silicone is below the loop and half is above. After the drying time indicated on your silicone bottle, 24 hours in my case, you can start taking your mold apart and see how good or bad you did. It is okay if some toothpicks come loose. You can always reattach them. Just make sure that you reattach them exactly where they were or at the highest point of your bit. Otherwise, you will need to dig a hole through the mold in order to pour the resin at the highest point of the cavity. But if you are at this very point of your build, please make sure that you attach your sprue at the highest point of your model. Once this is done, add enough layer of bricks to fully cover all of the bits parts, and then tape it over to prevent leaks like before. Here comes time to mix silicone again. As you can see, I am very smart and still not wearing gloves. Will I ever learn? But hey, at least I'm using the scale. Progress! Yay! This time, I am trying to show you what to do, unlike the previous time. So first, you mix both parts in your container, and you mix well in the first container. Don't let this speed up footage fool you. I mix for a strong 2 to 3 minutes. After that, you take your second container and you will pour the mix from the first container into the second without scraping the sides. You know, the thing we did the first time around. Don't do it. After that comes a little bit more mixing, just to make sure that part A and part B are really mixed together. And when pouring the top part of the mold, don't forget one thing. Well, I will let me from the past tell you. Oh, I forgot the mold release.
Så du är ingen fin näsa då, no?
So with that out of the way, I feel that it's my duty to also remind you that your mold should be level. My table was leveled and I had checked before pouring, but it is also something to keep in mind. And when I say check, I mean check in both directions. Please note that we are still not scraping our container, but also that we are pouring from a height. This is to minimize bubbles, or try to at least. 24 hours later, or whatever is indicated on your silicone bottles, it's time to take the mold apart. Remove all of those toothpicks and try to take both parts of your mold apart. Which, in my case, as a reminder, since we forgot mold release, was not the easiest thing to do. After much battling, it came apart. Yay! And if you think that it's the last lesson that I learned, you would be wrong. There's more coming. Here again, a safety warning. You will see me use UV resin without wearing gloves and without wearing safety glasses or UV glasses. Please do as I say, not as I do, and take care of your health. In the upcoming footage, I will try to explain to you what I did and why I failed. And in conclusion, I will let you know what I did to fix all of that, and at the end of the day, get models that I could put on the table. Failure number 1. So the first attempt, I left the silicone mold inside the Lego matrix, and that created some kind of over-constraint in the silicone mold, which meant that both sides could not press firmly against each other, and all the resin was going everywhere but in the mold that I wanted it to. Crossing fingers will not help here. This was the final result of attempt number 1. We can do better. Failure number 2. For the second attempt, I tried to learn from my mistakes and I removed the silicone mold from the matrix. I also tried to put more resin into the cavity, and as you can see here, wiggle the mold around, trying to make sure that the resin would go in every nook and cranny of the cavity. Unfortunately, as you can see here, I had not started filling the cavity from the bottom, and I started from the top, and a big bubble of air got stuck within the cavity, preventing me from filling it completely, and we now have half a gun. Better than nothing? Attempt number... who is counting? I tried many things between attempt number 2 and the attempt that you're about to see. One of my failures included not putting the mold in the right orientation and having the top of a jump pack on the bottom of a gun. That's why you see me double check everything here. Better safe than sorry. So as you can see here, I start by really putting the tip of the resin bottle to the bottom of the cavity and filling in from the bottom up. And on this attempt, I got carried away and did, I believe, 4 or 5 items in one casting, Go big or go home. I also tilted the mold in every single direction, hoping that the resin would go in every single nook and cranny of the cavity. After that, I put it under the UV light and let it cure 90 seconds on one side, flip the cavity and let it cure 90 seconds on the other side. I also had the issue where the bottom side was not completely cured when I opened the cavity, so I really wanted to put all the odds in my favor. After opening the mold, some items were still tacky, so here comes curing again. And this was the result. I must say, this was as good as it was going to get with the equipment that I had at the time. As you can see, these are not perfect, and there is some mold line cleaning to do. But I'll be honest with you, it's not bad at all. So what lesson did we learn in the making of those bits? The first thing that I learned is that I will stop complaining about GW mold lines on the minis because it is way harder than I thought to not have mold lines. And it's such a pain to clean up. Sorry, GW. The second thing that I've learned is that you need to make sure that both sides of your mold are mating and firmly pressed against each other. Making sure that all the sides are clean is also super important because otherwise you are just going to capture things that will damage your surface finish. I have also learned that trying to squeeze the tip of the UV resin bottle into a hole the size of a toothpick is not the easiest thing to do. So to do that, I bought those little bottles that come with pipette tops, for lack of a better word, that really can go all the way down to the bottom of the hole and help me fill the cavity with resin from the bottom up. Because it is UV resin and it's pretty expensive, I covered the bottles with tape so that the resin inside the bottle is protected from the UV rays and can be kept longer in the bottle. Besides those little details, everything else that we have seen in the last attempt still holds. Filling the molds from the bottom up, shaking the cavity in different directions to try to make sure that the resin goes everywhere, curing 90 seconds one side, flipping the mold, 90 seconds on the other, opening the mold, finishing the curing, and mold line cleaning. A lot of mold line cleaning. So since we took the footage for this video, those minis have been on the table and no one has seen any kind of difference. I'm not telling you that they are perfect. I'm telling you that they are good enough to be on a tabletop. So with all the lessons that I've learned and all the failure that I've had on the way to making those mold and those bits, I will leave every single thing that I used in the description box down below. Heads up, those are affiliated links. If you think that me doing the legwork to find all of those items is worth the couple of cents that I'm going to get, please click on them. Otherwise, feel free to just look at the name, Google them, and buy them on your own. I completely understand. At the end of the day, what I've learned is that it's not because you see a YouTube video that makes it seem easy that it is easy. But just look at those in action at Adepticon. It was worth it. If you watch this video till the end, please make sure to subscribe to our channel. Here are our social media handles. And if you make anything using those techniques, please tag us in social. We always love seeing what you guys make.